Hello and welcome to another cat and robot tech video. I am of course the robot and the cat is not important. Today we will be looking at a one-of-a-kind GPU, and that is the RTX 2060 Super. Okay, I lied. It's not one of a kind, but it is a GPU. The original RTX 2060 came out in 2019 and only had 6 GB of VRAM, and it was considered mid. I mean, it was the weakest GPU of Nvidia's new ray tracing lineup, and Nvidia was pushing ray tracing very hard. After all, they even renamed their GPUs for this launch after ray tracing. RTX stands for Ray Tracing Texel Extreme, with a capital X in Extreme. We will ignore the part about AI because every time you do, Jensen's leather jacket grows a little smaller. The 2060 Super came as a refresh on the series later in that same year, as a way to better compete with AMD's lineup and to answer some of the criticism of the original 2060, like its low VRAM and RT performance. The 2060 Super comes with 8 GB of VRAM, but also gives more CUDA cores, a better memory bus, and more RT cores for a better ray tracing performance. Overall, it was just a solid uplift compared to the original 2060. So, now that you are properly up to speed, today we will be looking at the RTX 2060 Super and how well it can game in 2025. Is it still worth buying? As you all know, the GPU market is a mess right now, but you can pick up this GPU on the used market for around $150 to $200. So our main objective today is to not just see how it performs, but to see if it is worth it for your gaming needs at that price point. I am also interested to see just how well does Nvidia's first ray tracing GPU hold up with ray tracing, and just how super is it. And I know we are all dying to find out just how much torture it can take. Our 2060 Super is an ASUS model, and the cat painted it white. I know, she did not paint it pink. How uncharacteristic of her. To complement our 2060 Super, we have our trusty Ryzen 5600 and 16 GB of 3200 MHz RAM, and we will be testing at 1080p. I will also be using a capture card so our system can fully focus on gaming. I think that about covers it all. Let's go ahead and get started with the benchmarks. Where the heck is the cat? Doesn't she know we are recording today? No, this is a good thing. She is not here, and we can finally have a serious GPU test. To start out our benchmarks, we will head into the new graphically enhanced version of Grand Theft Auto 5. This version is very fancy and now includes ray tracing. What a great first test. We can see how an Nvidia first-generation ray tracing card can perform in ray tracing right away. Starting out on the ray tracing high preset, we averaged 119 FPS with a minimum of 94 and a max frame rate of 147. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting here. I say that because while this is a solid performance from our GPU, GTA is a very old game. But on the other hand, we are also tracing rays, and this version of GTA just came out, so it is very new. It would be interesting to see how this GPU handles these same settings at 1440p, but that will have to be for another time. While this was a solid performance, I felt like our 2060 Super got off too easy here, so let's turn up the torture. Graphics, let's turn up the graphics. Switching to the max ray tracing preset, we can see a large drop in frames. On these settings, we averaged 52 FPS, with a low of 40 and a maximum frame rate of 64. Not super great, but at the same time, I was expecting a lot worse. And as always, you can customize the graphics to your preference and no doubt get a better performance, but I try to stick to the presets as much as I can to make the findings repeatable. The only time I really turn off settings from a preset is when they make performance a lot worse for no real gain, which I will do for some of our gaming benchmarks like our next game, Marvel Rivals. For Marvel Rivals, we will start on the medium preset with DLSS set to quality and global illumination and reflection quality turned off. Turning these two settings off will give us a nice boost in FPS without really changing the quality of our graphics. On these settings, we averaged 110 FPS, with a minimum of 61 and a max of 159. A solid performance for our GPU in a brand new esports title. There is frame gen we could turn on, but I did not bother testing it. Frame gen and multiplayer games do not really mix well. But still, some may want more performance, so we will turn our graphics down to the low preset, with the same settings otherwise. On these settings we did 3 separate rounds, and got 3 separate results, but I will fully report the lowest benchmark from those 3 rounds. In our lowest results, we averaged 143 FPS, with a low of 76 and a high of 191. In the other rounds, we averaged 155 and 158 FPS respectively, so your performance may slightly change based on the map and in-game hero selection. And the cat, once again, actually gamed in Marvel Rivals. This might be the only game this happens in. Do not get used to it, especially when we go to my favorite benchmark, Counter-Strike. We ran Counter-Strike on its medium preset with FSR set to quality. On these settings, the cat died many times and it was very enjoyable to watch. I mean, she really sucks at this game. Although, in her defense, she did get some kills, but there is a reason this is my favorite benchmark. On these settings, we averaged 217 FPS with a low of 122 and a max frame rate of 332. A solid gaming performance out of our RTX 2060 Super. And while that should be expected, and this game is not super demanding, I have seen some GPUs struggle here, like the Intel Arc B580. That is right, you heard that correctly. That was a B580 mentioned. Go ahead and mark off your bingo card for this review. I would have liked to test on the high and low preset, but the cat refused. She hates this game, and getting her to test it even once takes a lot of coercing. So thank the cat for voluntarily getting blasted by what she described as vape bros who have mained this game for the last 20 years, who own at least 6 Spyderco knives IRL, and have dreamed of getting into FaZe Clan for the last decade. The cat, throwing shade aside, our 2060 Super handled this game well, so I think we can move on. For Fortnite, I set the game to the medium preset with view distance set to epic and global illuminations and reflections turned off. On these settings, we averaged 184 FPS with a minimum of 90 and a max of 266. Overall, a pretty solid gaming experience. You certainly have room here to turn settings up if you desire, but if this was my main GPU and system, this is most likely where I would leave my settings and play at. And the cat managed to get 8 whole kills! That is 3 higher than she can count. How very exciting. So far, besides some high temps and potentially needing a repaste, our 2060 Super has been performing super. Did you see what I did there? And if anyone is worried about the temps, I guess I can add here that our GPU idles at 41 Celsius if anyone was curious. Well, besides continuing Fortnite to show all of Saya's kills, we will just move on. We ran Helldivers 2 on its high preset. That is right. No medium preset here, we are going all out because the spread of democracy should be done high. No, wait. On high, the spread of democracy should be done on high. On high settings, we averaged 85 FPS with a low of 71 and a max frame rate of 116. As always, we stick to the presets, so you most certainly can tweak settings around for a better performance, or even play on a lower graphical preset, but, in my opinion, the game played well here. Of course, some may want higher FPS or to match their monitor's refresh rate, and that is fair. But for a used 6-year-old GPU, not bad at all. Okay, we are halfway through these benchmarks, and Saya is still missing. Worried? Why would I be worried? This is great. Next, we will test out World of Warcraft. WoW is a mess. There is no other way to say it. The game is poorly optimized and CPU reliant, while also refusing to fully use the CPU at times, and performance can change greatly raid to raid, zone to zone, city to city. So while it is hard to get a solid baseline for how a GPU can perform here, we can get somewhat of a rough estimate. For our WoW tests, as always, we will test on 3 major criteria. How well does the GPU perform in the expansion's main city, which is more heavily taxing? How well does the GPU perform outside of the city? And how well does the GPU perform in raids? Of course, none of that matters if the GPU cannot perform well while zooming into a rock in World of Warcraft. So many testers not only overlook this, but don't even acknowledge it, and that deeply saddens me. So as you can see here, our RTX 2060 Super has a masterclass performance while zooming into a rock. Truly, this is peak gameplay and you should all be impressed. Moving on to less important tests, we will head into the main city and see how well we perform. We are playing on the medium 5 out of 10 setting slider. I suppose I should have started with that, but I was just too excited to zoom into a rock. But how can you even blame me? I mean, look at it. If this does not get your adrenaline pumping, you must not be alive. Right, well, in the city and flying about and sitting in the most intensive spot, we averaged 90 FPS with a low of 50 and a max of 250. Moving outside of the city, we averaged 221 FPS with a low of 116 and a max of 332. And once again, performance is always higher outside of the city where you are very alone with your thoughts and the dream of one day zooming back into a rock. Moving to one of the newer raids, we averaged 80 FPS with a low of 35 and a max frame rate of 178. And once again, raid performance can vary greatly depending on the raid size and fight, so your performance here can vary greatly. Overall, I don't think this was a bad performance. Raid FPS could have been a little higher, but at the same time, it was still a playable experience with no real issues. Heading into the magical world of Hogwarts Legacy, we moved our settings all the way to Ultra and set DLSS to quality. One interesting thing to note is, for all of these games where we can turn upscaling on, our settings defaulted to using FSR and not DLSS, and I thought that was kind of interesting to note. We could also adjust our settings this time, which one should never take for granted. On our RX 580 test, the graphics settings refused to open for whatever reason, and I did not fully know which settings we were benchmarking on. It should be noted that the game started us on Ultra, so perhaps we were testing on Ultra. We may never know. Right, so, on Ultra settings with DLSS on and running about the castle, we averaged 94 FPS with a low of 44 and a max of 141. A solid performance, but how is our FPS when running about Hogsmeade? In Hogsmeade, we averaged 78 FPS with a low of 48 and a max of 119 frames, which for all Ultra settings still seemed pretty good. And while this was a solid performance, I was not satisfied. Hogwarts Legacy has ray tracing, of course, so this is a good time to torture our GPU. But you can't spell torture without first turning off DLSS. So on Ultra settings with the max ray tracing settings and DLSS turned off and running about the castle, we averaged 43 FPS with a minimum of 14 and a max of 71. And honestly, while this performance is not great, I am surprised how well our GPU handled this. I mean, I was expecting under 20 FPS and maybe even crashing, but our GPU hung in there. While these are settings I most certainly would not play on, if you are into torturing both yourself and the GPU at the same time, there is a gaming experience to be had here. But torture aside, you can run this game just fine on Ultra settings, or even turn some settings down and run ray tracing with this card. I will admit I am impressed here. What a magical and super experience. For Cyberpunk, there are many different settings we can test, including torturing our card with ray tracing. How very exciting! It should be noted that for Nvidia's 20 and 30 series GPUs, we cannot use DLSS frame generation, but must instead rely on AMD's FSR. Only the 40 and 50 series can use DLSS frame gen. Say what you want about FSR and AMD, but they have done more to keep Nvidia's older generations relevant than Nvidia has. So when we use frame generation for this card and for this benchmark, we will be relying on FSR 3. Performance for this GPU in this game will be very mixed depending on your settings and preferences. As you can see with our amazing chart here, the card can run on native resolution and without frame gen and perform just fine. However, if you want to use ray tracing, your options for not using DLSS or FSR 3 frame gen are a bit more limited. It is interesting to see that FSR 2.1 has a slight increase of FPS over DLSS, but I do not think that small boost is worth it in terms of looks for DLSS versus FSR 2.1. And of course we are using the new DLSS transformer model that came with the launch of the 50 series, so I guess Nvidia did give that to its old hardware. But you will have to decide for yourself if the 2060 Super's performance here can fit your Cyberpunk needs. For Indiana Jones, we ran on the medium preset with DLSS set to quality, and we averaged 96 FPS with a low of 54 and a max of 152. Our performance surprised me here, especially at the start of the game. Indiana Jones has ray tracing built into it, meaning that it cannot be turned off, and if your card cannot ray trace, you cannot play this game. And what's more is that the start of the game can be very demanding. I see it as the developers flexing, showing how pretty their game can look. So performance can take a big dip here compared to what you might experience in other parts of the game. And our 2060 Super handled it very well. But while this was a solid performance, I wanted to see what would happen if we max every single setting and move our overall graphics quality to the Supreme preset. The game warned me about issues with VRAM, but I don't think it understands our card is super. I also turned off DLSS because I wanted a native gameplay experience. Restarting the game for all the new settings to take effect, the game would not restart and crashed. No problem, we can try again, and another crash. Huh? Okay, well I was not expecting that, but maybe if we try again? No crash again. Okay, so how do I change the settings back if it keeps crashing? Well, I guess it's an issue for the cat in the future and not our problem. I guess sometimes when torturing GPUs, we end up torturing ourselves. Very deep, very poetic, but I suppose we can move on. Monster Hunter Wilds is an unoptimized mess of a game and perfect for our testing purposes. And while it would be nice to test the gameplay itself, the cat is poor from buying too many PC parts and cannot afford new games, but at least we have the free benchmark to utilize. Running on the medium preset with DLSS set to performance, we averaged 57 FPS, because we always round up FPS, and a score of 19,338, and the game says it was a good performance. I don't really feel like it was, but if you say so, game, if you say so. Keeping with the medium preset but turning on FSR so we can use FrameGen, the game did not look the best at times, but we averaged 93 FPS and got a score of 16,019. And once again, the game says this was good. Well, I think it's time to find out what this game does not consider good. Turning to the high preset with ray tracing set to high and going back to DLSS, which we will set to balanced, we averaged 46 FPS with a score of 15,714. And still the game says it is good, son of a bitch. All right, I am starting to take this personal. Setting the graphics preset to ultra, the game yells at us that our 8 GB of VRAM is not enough. So in retaliation, we turn off upscaling, because DLSS is for people who are afraid to fly too close to the sun. We will keep ray tracing set to high because I really want to see those sun rays when we are flying close to the sun. Running with these settings, as you can see our graphics look amazing. No doubt the game will also find this good. Our FPS is struggling, that is true, but a little suffering builds character. And with these settings, and after running the full benchmark, the game gave us the great passing score of setting changes recommended. There, I knew we could do it. We averaged 29 FPS because we rounded up, and an amazing score of 9,639. Overall, I think we have learned a great deal about the RTX 2060 Super and Monster Hunter Wilds here, and while I cannot tell you exactly what that is at the moment, what I can tell you is we probably should have also tested on low and with other variations of settings. I guess this test was not super helpful for anyone now that I think about it. Well, we can all blame the cat for being more fixated on torture than testing our GPU in this game. Oh well, moving on. For our last test, we will move to Furmark. Furmark is a great free tool for stress testing your GPU, but it also comes with a helpful benchmarking tool. We can use this tool to compare our RTX 2060 Super to other GPUs. For these tests, we will try two different benchmarks, Furmark GL and Furmark VK. Running Furmark GL first, we scored 6,834 points. And as you can see here, we can compare our score to other GPUs and other systems. It should be noted that different CPU and RAM variations can also affect scores, but you can click on other results and see some of their system specs. Either way, it is a fun tool to see how your GPU compares to others. You also do not have to run a test first to access this page, so it can be helpful to those also deciding about one GPU over another. Moving on to the Furmark VK benchmark, we scored 6,754 points. And once again, we can compare our results to others for this test. While I do find this fairly helpful, not all people rely or trust synthetic benchmarks, and that is fair. And that is because in some cases a GPU can perform better in a synthetic benchmark versus their actual real-world performance. So comparing GPUs just based off of synthetic benchmarks does not always give the full picture. But still, I think they give a good estimate for comparison versus other GPUs, especially when combined with other tests. It is also a good way to see how lucky you were with the Silicon Lottery by seeing how your GPU stacks up against other similar models. Overall, we set out today to see how well this GPU can handle gaming in 2025 and if it is worth it. Oh right, we also set out to see just how super it is. I guess we can start with that. Is this GPU super? No, not at all, but it is better than the RTX 2060. If you somehow find yourself debating between the two, save up the little extra and get the super variant. For the other questions, well, in my opinion, if you are gaming at 1080p and need a new GPU on a budget, or a placeholder card while the GPU market settles for its price on the used market, I would say this GPU is worth it, especially if you get it at or close to $150. While it is no beast at ray tracing, it can do it, and if you set your expectations appropriately, you can still get a decent gaming performance out of this GPU with some light ray tracing enabled. 8 GB of VRAM is most certainly a limiting factor in 2025, but at 1080p and with the proper settings, you can still get a playable experience out of most modern titles. If the GPU market was not a wasteland at the moment, I might have a harder time recommending this GPU, but as it is, this card is a solid value for its price. Although many would argue to just go for the RX 6600, and while I cannot fully argue against that suggestion, the 2060 Super does offer DLSS, Nvidia's streaming encoders, and a better ray tracing performance. And it has super in the name, I mean, come on. But as always, the choice is yours if this card is worth it or not. I run these benchmarks and tests and show you all, so you can decide for yourself. At any rate, thank you all for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel and help Saya in her ability to buy more tech to review, you can join our channel membership. But if not, that is fine too. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day or night. Okay, this is weird. This is normally where the cat shows up and says something dumb. Where the heck is she? I'm almost afraid to admit it, but I am kind of worried.
Double KO!
I am at your service.
Here they come now.
Quantum match.
Oh shit, I forgot. The pop-tarts on. I hope I'm not too late.